So to settle the debate once and for all, does direct cold exposure cause you to get sick? No. But does every aspect of winter covertly try to...
Okay, Google. Can being in the cold make you sick?
That's a really common question, and the short answer is no. The cold weather itself doesn't make you sick.
All right, man, look, we are back with another video. This is totally wrong facts you probably still believe.
Facts that people still believe. The flat earth fallacy. Okay, we all know that the earth is flat, right?
No, right, like no.
I'm obviously joking, and I'll save the tinfoil hat for another day. But what I'm referring to isn't flat earthers in the modern day, but it's the flat earth belief that was held by people in the Middle Ages, specifically around the time when Christopher Columbus took his infamous journey across the ocean. Obviously, during the Middle Ages, it was believed that the earth was flat and that if you were to sail too far in the wrong way in the ocean, you could literally fall off the earth. And it was for this reason that Christopher Columbus wanted to prove these people wrong and risked his life sailing the opposite way to India to prove that the earth was round and not flat, going against the primary belief at that time. Now, what if I told you that everything you just heard about that situation is not true whatsoever?
What do you mean? Like, is that not Christopher Columbus sailed the ocean blue and something 42 or something like that?
It is actually a rather popular misconception. Let me explain. While Christopher Columbus did sail across the ocean to prove a point, the point he was not trying to prove was that the earth wasn't flat. The point he was trying to prove was that the earth wasn't as big as some people suspected. It is historical fact that not only Christopher Columbus, but basically any educated individual during the 1400s knew that the earth wasn't flat and was in fact round. And this knowledge dates back far before...
Wait, dead ass? I didn't know that. Bro, what we were taught in school is that he did that so he could prove that the earth wasn't flat. That's what I was taught in school.
Christopher Columbus or even the Middle Ages entirely. Some of the first recorded suggestions that the earth may be round actually date all the way back to the 6th century BC with the Greek philosopher Pythagoras. And later in the 4th century BC, Aristotle even agreed and supported this theory, citing one personal observation that he noticed every time he traveled southward, southern constellations would be higher in the sky. But
they left out the, extremely racist. Extremely, yes. But that's, you know, everything, look at me, everything leads, all roads lead back to racism. So that's nothing new, you know.
This, of course, wasn't the only evidence we had of the Earth being round. During this time, we also had recorded observations of lunar eclipses showing a round shadow on the moon from Earth, and of course, numerous eyewitness accounts of mountains seemingly growing out of the ground on the horizon as you approach them, or seeing a ship seemingly submerge into the water as it sails into the ocean. My point is that we've had a lot of evidence that the Earth is round, and it dates back far, like way before...
So, like, why do flat earthers just not choose to look at any of this other evidence? That'd be so crazy. Like, there's really people that still believe the earth is flat.
Middle Ages and even way before the Common Era. But just to further validate this point, in the 3rd century BC, it wasn't just a suggestion that the earth may be round. At this point, it was basically a known fact to anybody in the educated community. And philosophers and scientists were not so much focused on the shape of the earth, but the size of the earth. And potentially, most impressively, at this time, the head librarian of the Library of Alexandria, Eratosthenes, was able to estimate the circumference of the earth with 99% accuracy. And while that estimate wasn't proven to be extremely accurate until much later, it still goes to show that there is a lot of evidence suggesting that not only was the world not flat very long ago, but that people were well aware that the earth was not flat. Which brings us back to our original point. No, Christopher Columbus did not think that he was potentially going to fall off the world, and nobody who was educated or even slightly paying attention thought that either. And while seemingly flat earthers have existed in every era of history, they're as ridiculous today as they were back in 1492. Now,
damn, y'all been dumb forever. Got it. Makes sense.
This next wrong fact I want to mention isn't even a wrong...
You know what? It's passed down dumbassery. That's what it is. Passed down dumbassery.
Wrong fact at all. It's honestly just a shocking truth. What was the point of this entire expedition? Well, like I mentioned earlier, Columbus didn't believe the mainstream theory of how big the Earth was. And his goal with the support from Queen Elizabeth was not to prove that the Earth was round or not to see what was beyond the edge of the Earth, but to potentially find a more quick and efficient trade route between...
Oh, yeah. So whoever said trade route is correct. He was just trying to see what, like, find a easier way. Oh, okay. I was taught this. I was taught the fact that he thought the earth was flat. I just realized that a lot of education changes and they don't take the time to go back and tell the people that they taught wrong information to the right information. Honestly, I think they would keep lying about teachable moments like this if we couldn't go on the internet and find this shit ourselves. I'm not gonna lie to you.
between Europe and Asia to optimize international trade. And of course, we all know what happened from there on out, and well, here we are. So yeah, the suggestions from people in the Middle Ages believing the Earth was flat are actually modern misinformation, with this myth being brought to the mainstream in the 1700s and 1800s. And unfortunately today, stick figures on the internet still need to undo all of this misinformation. But in case you wanted a real misconception that was believed during the Middle Ages, I'll give you one. A lot of people during this time suspected that the sun rotated around the Earth. That was until Nicholas Copernicus came around and suggested that maybe the Earth rotated around our sun. And he did so not with observable evidence, but with a mathematical model that was not only hard to argue, but was eventually proven true. The Mount Everest myth. If learning that the Earth is actually round blew your mind, then this is about to shatter it. Everybody and their grandmother's grandmother knows that Mount Everest is by far the tallest mountain in the entire world.
Yep.
But what if I told you that actually wasn't the case?
Are you talking about that underwater mountain? That only thing that can come to mind is the mountain that starts underwater, or
Now,
that
before
is
you think
underwater.
I'm lying, let me just confirm that yes, Mount Everest has the highest peak above sea level in the entire world. The
Yes.
peak of Mount Everest is 29,029 feet above sea level, and it is confirmed the tallest peak around the globe. But
Yeah,
what if I
tallest peak.
told you
That's why he's saying peak, tallest peak.
that there was another mountain that was technically taller? If you're confused, don't worry, because I'm about to make it all make sense. Introducing Mauna Kea, a dormant volcano on the island of Hawaii. Looking at this mountain, it's relatively impressive, but only stands at roughly 13,800 feet above sea level, meaning that it's tall, but it's obviously not taller than Mount Everest. That is, unless you measured from base to peak.
Yep.
And this is where this technicality comes into play, because Mauna Kea is kind of like an iceberg, and there's a lot more than meets the eye. Specifically, the 20,000 feet of mountain that exists under the
Underwater, yep.
ocean. That's right. Unlike Mount Everest, the base of Mauna Kea is submerged deep underwater. And it's for that reason that while from base to tip, it is technically 4,000 feet taller than Mount Everest, due to the fact that most of it is actually underwater, it will unfortunately never claim the title of tallest mountain simply because it has a pretty significant disadvantage of existing in an ocean. It's almost like you were 6'5" and you went to a tall guy competition.
And you had to stand in a hole. That actually
But in
makes
order
a
to
lot of
compete,
sense.
you had to stand
From base to tip, huh? Get your freaky... bro, you ain't typed nothing.
in a 5-inch hole, meaning that you were only 6 foot. And while the person you were competing was standing on flat ground and was only 6'1" tall, well, guess what? This other guy is technically taller than you, even if you have a few inches underground. But I have a feeling this one might be a bit controversial, so let me know what you think. Does anything below sea level not count, even if it is part of the mountain's base? Or is Mauna Kea an underdog that deserves more attention? Because realistically, base to tip, it is the tallest mountain in the entire world. I'll let you guys duke it out in the comments, but if you ever want to be the most annoying person in the world, next time you hear somebody claim that Mount Everest is the tallest mountain in the world, make sure to confidently and rudely tell them, no, actually, Mount Everest has the tallest peak in the world, but Mauna Kea is the tallest base to tip. And in case that doesn't kill the mood at the party, well, then just tell them how much you hate pineapple on pizza, because those people are annoying too. The hot-headed hoax. One experience I had when I was younger that I think we all share is the experience of being a kid and not wanting to wear a coat. There was just so many times where it was cold out, but I didn't want to wear a coat. I had no logical explanation, I just didn't feel like wearing that restrictive device. But every single time, Mama Bro made me wear my coat and we went about our day. But it wasn't always a coat I was apprehensive to wear. Sometimes it was hats and gloves. Which brings me to the myth at play. My mom used to tell me that you have to wear a hat when it's cold out because 80% of the heat from your body leaves through your head.
I was told that. I was told that through your head and your feet control your temperature. That's why I was told to always keep something on your feet and always keep something on your head if you're trying to warm up.
For that reason, you need to insulate it to ensure you are fully warm. And I know for a fact my mom wasn't the only person to say that. And if I was a betting man, I would say that your mom probably did too. But whether it was a family member or a loved one or a friend or even just a news article, the reality is this. Your head is not some elusive chimney that is dead set on lowering your body's core temperature. But before we use facts to completely debunk this myth, let's actually trace back the origins of it. And it's not that long ago. The most commonly accepted origin of this myth dates back to the 1970s in a
Talk to me.
U.S. Army Survival Manual, where in that survival manual it claims that covering your head is a necessity in the cold because, quote, 40 to 45% of body heat is lost from the head. And
Why
while
do
you
they lie
think
like
a U.S. Army Survival Manual would be a relatively reputable source for this sort of information, this is one thing they got wrong. But at this point, you might be asking yourself, where did they even get this number or this theory? How did they come up with 40 to 45% of your body heat being lost through your head? And well, those roots date back to the 1950s, where the U.S. military was doing tests on volunteers dressed in Arctic survival suits and were exposed to bitterly cold conditions. And the point of this test was to see where the body was losing most heat in these suits to better help optimize them. And during this flawed analysis, one thing that the scientists realized was that, most of the body heat in these volunteers is being lost through their head. But as you can see, these Arctic survival suits do not include hats, meaning that logically the head would lose the most heat, not because it is some crazy part of the body, it's just the fact that the head was not covered. And scientists who went back to analyze this data have even been recorded to say, quote, if the experiment had been performed with people only wearing swim trunks, then they would have lost no more than 10% of the heat through their heads.
Holy shit. This experiment just wasn't performed correctly. So based off that incorrectly performed experiment, niggas just been lying. That's actually insane.
And it's almost hard to believe that such a simple seeming logical fallacy would exist in such a professional place, you know, a literal military survival test. But I suppose this one was overlooked because, yeah, if your entire body is insulated and only your head is exposed to the elements, your head definitely will lose the most amount of heat. Not because your head is vulnerable, but because the head was the only part that was literally exposed to the elements.
Literally.
So here's the facts. While it may seem logical that your head may be more vulnerable because of the lack of fat and the abundance of blood vessels, the reality is that heat escapes from all parts of the human body at a similar rate per
I was always told the head and the feet.
Square inch. And while in your own personal experience, it may seem like your head is the primary source of your heat loss in cold weather, as we saw in the military test, it's not necessarily because your head is extra vulnerable, it's because typically your head is the least insulated with clothing. So yeah, is it a good idea to wear a hat or a toque on a cold day? Definitely. But is it because your head loses much more heat than the rest of your body? No. Your head is just more vulnerable because most people aren't wearing toques all the time. And even if you are wearing a toque, it's very unlikely that you're insulating your head like you're insulating your chest. Because you could put on a coat and insulate your entire torso. But unless you're wearing a balaclava and ski goggles, your head is always going to be less insulated. Not biologically, but by choice.
The
cold conundrum. Okay, since we're already on the topic of cold weather and stuff your mom told you, I figured this would be the perfect follow-up. And the follow-up in question is the interesting fact that you can get sick from being exposed to the cold. Logically, it makes sense.
Okay, don't actually piss me off. I used to get sick from being too cold. I used to get sick from being out in the cold too long.
It's called a cold, you get it from being cold. What else is there to question? That is logical fact. But what if I was to be so bold to suggest that it wasn't the cold weather that was directly causing flu season to affect people? And I know it may sound blasphemous to your grandmother, but going outside without a hat or with wet hair isn't going to cause you to catch pneumonia.
How the fuck is it not? No. Nah, because this is about to turn my whole world upside down. Yo, deadass, the wet hair part definitely makes me... That's why my mom used to be like, if it's cold outside, don't wash your hair right before you go outside. Because your pores is open, you're gonna get sick. Literally, that's... Bro.
So what's the real scoop? Well, for starters, it's proven that you can't get an infectious or viral disease simply from being exposed to cold temperatures. However, you can get hypothermia, but that's different. So why do seemingly so many people catch colds or the flu as soon as the seasons start to change? There has to be something to it. And the fact of the matter is, there is something to it, but it's a lot more than meets the eye. You see, just because you don't develop a flu upon first contact with a cool breeze, doesn't mean that there's not factors at play that cause the typical flu season. And while temperatures getting cooler may be the most obvious and seemingly guilty culprit, it's really one of the least. And some of the more unlikely culprits are the following. Firstly, reduced vitamin D levels, because as winter approaches, people are spending less time outside, the sun is seen less in most parts of the world, and as a result, your vitamin D levels are below what they should be. On top of this, during cooler months, overall air humidity is lowered, and it has been proven that lower humidity can increase your risk of rhinoviruses. And third,
like, the fact that this is making sense is genuinely pissing me off. I'm not even gonna lie.
Rhinoviruses are typically spread through direct person-to-person contact, or by inhaling small droplets in the air, which is gross. But these things can only take place when you're coming in contact with people, typically in an enclosed environment. And during colder months, we typically spend more time inside, meaning that there's more risk of exposure. And when you combine all three of these factors all happening at the same time, it's not really hard to understand how more people could be more susceptible to diseases at a certain time of year. regardless of the outside temperature. So to settle the debate once and for all, does direct cold exposure cause you to get sick? No. But does every aspect of winter covertly try to...
Okay, Google. Can being in the cold make you sick?
That's a really common question, and the short answer is no. The cold weather itself doesn't make you sick.
Okay, Google. Shut the fuck up. Yo, my whole life is a lie. I'm glad it's not true, yes. Mom, you a fucking liar. Bro, the truth is she didn't know either. Oh, my life is a lie.
Get you sick? I would say yes. Meaning that just because you're safe from a cold breeze doesn't mean you're safe from a cold. Bubblegum bewilderment. Okay,
Huh?
Admittedly, this entry is a bit...
Wait, is that the whole swallowing gum thing? Oh, please tell me about this. Because I used to swallow gum and I feel like I used to think I was dying.
less serious, but I think it's definitely the most universal, and call it a playground fact if you will, because I believe that almost everybody watching this video either believed or at least heard...
Bro, no cap chat. Like, for a year straight, as a kid, like, after I chewed gum, I just swallow it. I wasn't spitting it out. And then my homie told me, they was like, you know you're not supposed to swallow gum, right? You can't digest it. It's gonna stay in your stomach forever. You're gonna die. And I was just like, oh, like... I've never swallowed gum again after that, but like for like months I was fucking panicking.
Of this next fact, which is that if you swallow chewing gum, it will stay in your stomach for 7 years. Or, you know, some variation of that. And if you've ever heard this, well, I'm about to give you the full scoop. And if you still believe this, well, I'm about to blow your mind. Obviously, because I'm talking about this in this video, the gum does not stay in your body for 7 years. It actually stays in your digestive system for over 20 years. That is a joke. It does not at all.
You almost pissed me clean off. I thought I was cooked. Bro, no. I thought I was so cooked just now. I was like, bro.
You see, it is true that gum is indigestible. Your body can simply not break it down and process it. But that does not mean that your body can't pass it through. And believe it or not, you probably eat a lot of things that your body can simply not digest. And if you don't believe me, well, two popular examples are corn and sunflower seeds. And don't even get me started on indigestible fibers. Keep in mind, your body is resilient. And just imagine all the stuff that our ancient stomachs had to deal with. And just think about all the things your body had to deal with when you were a kid. You know, swallowing Lego and eating Polly Pocket pieces. Or possibly even shoving those light bright things up your nose.
This nigga's a millennial for sure. I haven't heard about the light bright and a Polly Pocket. I haven't heard about them shits in years. That's a millennial, bro, I'm telling you.
Regardless, your body in one way or another is able to deal with pretty interesting situations. It is for that reason that gum in your digestive tract, at least on rare occasions, is not a concern. But it does in fact differ from standard digestion. Let me explain. In the context of normal food items, there is a 3-step process that every food must go through before it can be digested. First, your food must be, of course, chewed. And this chewing process not only breaks down food, but also increases its surface area, which is directly beneficial for the next step of the process, which is actually executed by your saliva. Your saliva covers these small pieces of food, and with its now increased surface area, your saliva's enzymes are able to break it down even further. And once the food is properly chewed and salivated, it is then sent to your stomach for the final stage of processing, where your stomach acid turns all of your food into a smooth mush that your digestive tract can easily pass through and absorb nutrients out of. And while this is the process for most foods, gum does not play by these rules at all. For starters, you can chew gum all day long, and the breakdown it's going to experience is minimal. And the vast majority of people will spit out their gum before it'll ever begin to break down into smaller pieces. But even if you did intentionally chew your gum into smaller pieces, it's not going to affect what happens in the next 2 stages. You see, chewing gum is made out of both natural and synthetic polymers. And it's for this reason that the gum cannot be broken down by either your saliva or your stomach acid. And that's honestly a good thing, because if your body was able to break down the polymers for your digestive tract to absorb it, you would get very sick. So be grateful it's kind of immune to those processes. But regardless, now that you have intact gum, not only in your stomach, but now in your digestive tract, what happens? Well, like any other food product, it'll slowly make its way through your digestive system, potentially getting caught up on the way, but eventually getting its way out, typically in 1 to 2 days. Although gum can be sticky, your body is designed to get rid of even the most stubborn of foods, and that includes chewing gum. But I will say this, even though chewing gum won't stay in your stomach for 7 years like you might have thought on the playground, it's not recommended that you start swallowing it en masse. And that's because if you do swallow enough chewing gum, you can develop something that's known as a bezoar, which is just essentially a blockage in your digestive tract, which can be painful, dangerous, and even deadly if left untreated. So no, chewing gum does not...
Okay, chat, so still don't swallow the gum, but we're good. The gum that I swallowed a couple years ago, back when I was in like elementary or middle, I'm good.
Stay in your body for numerous years, although it's not recommended you try it for yourself. The Chameleon Con. I'm about to take you on an emotional roller coaster, but spoiler alert, it has a happy ending, so buckle up. We all know that chameleons can change color. That is their claim to fame, and I am not going to take that from them. That is an undisputed fact. But the thing that I will dispute is the fact that they do this for camouflage purposes. In almost every cartoon and TV chameleon we see, they are specifically changing their colors to blend into a specific environment. And while this is a neat party trick and a logical survival instinct, this is actually not what's going on in most cases. But before I describe exactly why chameleons actually change color, I want to describe exactly how they change color, because this process is amazing. You see, in the skin of a chameleon, it has what is known as pigment cells. Pigment cells aren't necessarily rare in the animal kingdom, and there are certain animals that could even control them, such as squids and cuttlefish. Those animals actually have—
They change color for their emotions. I don't think it's to blend in. I think it's to look like a predator instead of prey. Isn't that? I thought that was what it was for.
small muscles that can expand or contract these pigment cells to change their color. However, that's not how the chameleon changes its colors. It has these pigment cells, but it can't control them. Now, interestingly, between these pigment cells, chameleons have separate cells that have darker melanin pigment, and these cells specifically can be controlled by the chameleon. And how this works is really quite astonishing. These melanin pigment cells basically expand or contract across the surface of the skin to either darken or lighten the skin of the chameleon. And this works completely separately from the default pigment cells that are already on the skin. Chameleons aren't the only animal that do this process either. There's a fish known as the tilapia fish that also has this same method of color changing. And you can see on this close-up video exactly how it works in real time, and it is so crazy. Seeing it side by side on a visual level and on a cellular level is so interesting. But we're still not done yet, because on top of the pigment cells that already exist and the melanin pigment cells that the chameleon can control, the chameleon also has tiny crystals in its skin that reflect light. And by seemingly some miracle, the chameleons can control exactly how far these crystals are from each other within its own skin. And the distance that these crystals are from each other directly determine the type of light that is reflected off the chameleon's skin. And now that we know the three primary tools in a chameleon's tool belt when it comes to changing color, how does this look in real time? Because I think most of us have a falsified idea of how this even looks. Here's a side-by-side video of a fake chameleon change and a real chameleon change. As you can see, the real is a little bit slower and a lot less dramatic, but still amazing nonetheless. But to go back to the original point of this section,
so the one on the left is fake.
As you can see, the real is a little bit slower and a lot less dramatic, but
he went
still amazing nonetheless. But to go back to the original point of this section, if chameleons don't change their color for camouflage, why do they change their color at all? And sometimes fact is stranger than fiction, because chameleons are basically nature's mood ring, and scientists are pretty certain that in most cases, the only reason that chameleons are changing color are to better express their emotions.
So it is emotions. You were right. I thought it was to look. So what animal camouflage, or what's the name itself, changes its color to look like the predator?
To potential mates or to potential predators. And scientists even have their own theories on what each color means, which I'll go through right now. It's believed that when chameleons are extremely bright and colorful, they are at their most excited. And this could mean excited about a potential fight or excited about a potential mating session. I said mating session. When chameleons are typically darker, it's believed they are feeling more submissive or relaxed, for a less sensual word. But yeah, chameleons are cool, cute, cuddly. Some of them even have horns, but what you've been told about them is a lie. And it's believed that in the vast majority of cases, chameleons don't change color to blend in, they're changing color to better express themselves, which I think is an even cooler reality than what's portrayed in movies. But that's just my opinion. The subscriber scam. I think that one common fact most people believe is that if somebody's watching your video, they're probably subscribed to you. But I'm here to tell you that that fact is completely wrong. And I've got the facts to prove it.
He asking for the subscribers. I respect it. I respect the hustle. Hey, you watching right now and you not subscribed. Go ahead and subscribe for me, Twan. Go subscribe to him too. His video's linked in the description, but subscribe to me first.
The fortune cookie falsehood. Growing up, getting Chinese food was a special occasion, and it was truly one of my favorite special meals. And out of the entire seemingly endless spread that we would order,
I actually, chat, no cap, I actually hate fortune cookies. I think they're so gross.
From these Chinese.
And also, I heard if you don't eat the fortune cookie, your fortune doesn't come true. So I just don't get a fortune. I never open them because I'm like, I'm not going to eat the fortune cookie. So I'm good off the fortune. You know what I'm saying?
Food places, my favorite part of the meal was always the fortune cookie. Obviously a staple in Chinese cuisine and a long-lasting tradition in Chinese culture, right? The fortune cookie, always served in Chinese restaurants, has to be Chinese. It would make no sense any other way, right? And while I agree with that hypothesis, I'm sorry to tell you, but that is not the truth. The fortune cookies that you and I get in modern day Chinese food have almost nothing to do with China whatsoever. And ironically, when the whole fortune cookie craze took over the Western world, companies tried tried selling fortune cookies in China, marketing them as a American treat, but they were taken
What?
off shelves because nobody was interested in them. And I genuinely don't think you can get more ironic than that. But if the paper in cookie tradition doesn't come from China and the cookie doesn't come from China, then who came up with these crazy cookies and why do they sell them at Chinese food spots? Well, I'm gonna answer both of those questions. But to be totally transparent, there is no definitive historical source of Chinese fortune cookies. All we have is some more modern accounts and some historical speculation, with the most proven and accepted theory being that Chinese fortune cookies actually originate in Japan. One of the only historical records
I mean, it's right there. You know what I'm saying? They like right there.
of modern-day Chinese fortune cookies exist in illustrations from 19th century Japan. And these illustrations show a treat known as
Nigga said close enough.
Yura senbei. But these illustrations aren't just a relic from the past, because to this day, you can buy this treat handmade on the streets of Kyoto. And how they make it is the following. Bakers will use iron molds, will grill the dough to a medium firm consistency, and then they will fold this dough into something they call small waffles. And it's during this folding process where they will insert a piece of paper with the fortune and give it its classic curved shape. But admittedly, this Japanese version and the Western version you and I are likely used to eating are not the same. With Tsujiyora senbei, for example, they are larger, darker, and savory. Whereas in the American version, they are sweeter, smaller, and lighter in texture because they are using butter instead of miso in the baking process. But while that is interesting and insightful, it's still
Savory. If I go to Japan, I'm gonna have to try one of those because a fortune cookie being savory is just, I can't think about how that would taste.
doesn't answer the question, how did this get into Chinese restaurants in America? And well, the answer is immigration and adaptability. During the 1910s, a lot of Japanese immigrants were landing in California. And with them, they brought their culture, specifically Tsujiyora senbei. And while that logically explains why these fortune cookies are in America, why are they in Chinese restaurants? And while this isn't definitively proven, the most commonly accepted answer as of now is a result of Asian fusion food restaurants and America's early on disdain for Japanese food. And what I mean by this is, in the 1910s, a lot of Japanese immigrants were struggling to open authentic Japanese restaurants, specifically because Americans were not too fond of eating raw fish. And because of this, these Japanese entrepreneurs decided that their best next steps were to create Chinese food restaurants.
So they lied. The Japanese were faking like they were Chinese. Also probably racist. Probably. What is it tied to, chat? Everybody say it with me. Racism.
Tailoring the dishes to the American palate, specifically giving a sweet treat at the end of a meal. Hence why the American fortune cookie is sweet and the Japanese version is, well, not. I saved this entry for the end of the video because technically it's not fact. There is a lot of working theories about all of the specific origins, and there is not one definitive historical account start to finish of the entire history of fortune cookies. However, what I've told you today is most commonly the accepted version of events. However, you could argue it's not fully known. And well, that's accurate. But I honestly just think the entire history of fortune cookies is just so interesting because it was a Japanese tradition that was brought to America, was extremely popular in America, was brought to China, and failed in China, which is, I don't know, ironic and worth mentioning. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, we are going to conclude our second video about totally wrong facts you probably still believe. If you
W video, man. Hey, man. I ain't gonna lie. Chat, we learned a little something today. Not gonna lie. A little bit of learning. That cold thing really fucked me up, though. I ain't gonna lie. But, nonetheless, W video. Shout out to Trust Me, bro. Yeah, man. If you like the video, subscribe, turn on notifications, and I'll catch y'all on the next one.